Welcome back to another episode of Her Expat Life. We are the YouTube channel that is dedicated to bringing female expats, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, and women who have a global lifestyle all the latest information to keep them motivated, to keep them informed, and to keep them excited about living and loving abroad. And every now and again, we feature a very, very inspiring female. And today is no different. I am very happy and very excited to welcome Danielle Belton to her Expat Life today. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you so very much for asking.
So, for those of you who are not in the know, definitely should be in the know, Danielle Belton is quite a powerhouse in the media spaces. She is the current editor in chief of HuffPost, a position that she's held for just over 2 years, if I believe. Am I
Yeah, I'm
correct,
going into
Danielle?
year three next year.
Yeah, amazing. Before this, Danielle was the editor in chief of a Black digital publication called The Root. And prior to this, she had also done a writing stint as the head writer for BET's talk show Don't Sleep, hosted by TJ Holmes in 2012. So, Danielle, you've definitely had quite a long and fruitful career in the media space. First of all, congratulations on your position as editor in chief, even though you're not new to the role. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did everything start for you? How did Danielle get into writing, and how did you get to this point now?
Sure. So I've always had a passion for journalism since I was very young. I started reading the newspaper daily around age 11, and I just was obsessed with it. I read anything I could get my hands on as a kid. I read any and every type of book, and it just made logical sense that I was fascinated, by what was going on in the world on a daily basis as well. Because I was just a really curious kid. I wanted to understand why the world is the way that it is. And all journalism is really history written in its first draft. So, and I love
Mm,
history. So it worked. It worked for me. And then both my parents were news junkies. They loved, CBS. They watched CBS News. They watched the local CBS News. They watched 60 Minutes. And then when we got cable, they were into CNN and MSNBC. And we always watched Meet the Press with Tim Russert, so we were a serious news family. So, I mean, we got every Black magazine here in the US. I would go to the library and check out books and various publications. So I had a very well-rounded beginning in journalism that was quite fruitful in that I was obsessed with it. And I think I wanted to do it from an early age, but for whatever reason, I didn't initially pursue it. When I went off to college, I originally was an art major because I love to draw cartoons. Of course, the only reason why I like to draw cartoons is because I was obsessed with the Sunday's funny sections in the newspaper where they would show all the comic strips. And I just
yeah.
wanted a comic strip in a newspaper. So I was still just trying to get to journalism. I was just using art as the way
Hmm.
instead of writing. And then my father suggested that I go into journalism because I was having such a hard time in the art program. And I remember my response to him, I was just like, I don't know, there's no money. And my dad was like, well, I was going to let you be an artist and there's no money there. And I was just like,
Yeah.
okay. Fast forward, I go to J school. I graduate in 3.5 years. I work for various small town newspapers in Texas and California. I eventually go on to start my own website, The Black Snob, around 2007. That takes off for me. It's a politics and pop culture blog here in the US. And that was a huge game changer for me because I was convinced that if people could just see my writing and see that I had the ability to build an audience out of nothing, that I would be able to get work. And I was correct. And almost every job I got was due to that blog afterwards. I wrote for different digital websites, lots of different news organizations, the Washington Post, New York Times, American Prospect, Essence, the Daily Beast, Huffington Post. Like I wrote for everybody. Like I was a will travel freelance journalist for quite some time. And then I worked in the world of nonprofits for a little bit. And I also, as you mentioned, was a TV writer. I worked as a comedy writer for BET on their late night talk show. And so eventually I got the job at The Rude. And I originally came there as an associate reporter and was quickly promoted within a year to managing editor, which at the time was the highest position in the organization. And after 1 year of me in the lead, I was promoted to editor in chief. And we grew traffic by over 300%. in 2017. And so that was absolutely incredible. And, I built up the Roots brand. We got lots of really huge interviews with big newsmakers like Representative Ayanna Pressley. When she lost her hair to alopecia, she revealed her bald head first on the Root. So I was really proud of what we were able to do there. And from there on, I was able to get the job at HuffPost, where I am to this day, where we create award-winning, fantastic journalism. I look over a staff of about 127 of us, and give or take. And it's probably one of the best jobs I've ever had.
Okay, so that takes me to my next question. What inspired you to become the editor in chief at HuffPost, and what do you think are the most important values that your publication should uphold?
The reason why I went into management was I was trying to solve a problem. As a longtime writer and journalist, the thing that was always the biggest impediment to my success wasn't, my skills or my talent or my understanding of the world. It was always just bad management, like just
Mm.
really horrible management. I had a successful career often in spite, of some of the managers I had had in the past, because about half of them were good and half of them I was just like, how did you even get here? So I wanted to create a newsroom that would be more supportive of a writer like myself. And so that is why I went into leadership. I was trying to create an environment where writers and editors could truly flourish. Therefore, the journalism would be stronger, the writing would be better, the engagement would be higher, the audience would grow, and people would get the information that they need so they can go about their daily lives informed and make practical decisions for themselves. Because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. I want us to have a well informed public. And HuffPost and I share a lot of values. I mean, I wouldn't be here if we weren't aligned on a lot of them. A lot of HuffPost is all about being people centered. We're all about creating news that reflects the individual living in America today, specifically individuals of all walks of life and all backgrounds and all races. We're all about representing the America as it actually is, not how it's traditionally been portrayed or how people have talked about it in the past. We want to show the true face of this country, which is multifaceted and diverse and from all walks of life and from all parts of the country. We have journalists, in the major cities like New York and LA, but we also have journalists in, Washington, D.C. We have journalists in Georgia. We have journalists all over the United States working for HuffPost, West Virginia, you name it. And I think that's what adds to the richness and the depth of our reporting. The fact that we have people from so many different places, Baltimore, that are able to like really contribute in a meaningful way. So that's kind of where I see it.
Okay, and what advice do you have for other Black women who aspire to lead in the entertainment industry, especially in a male dominated space, based on your experience as the first Black woman to lead a writer's room in a late night BET Network award nominated talk show?
Oh, the best advice I would say is a couple of things. One, develop a thick skin. All of the entertainment industry is criticism. All of journalism is criticism. You're going to deal with critics of all kinds, from your own editors and superiors to random people on the street. Like everyone's going to have an opinion. And so you're going to have to develop a thick skin and the ability to discern which of these opinions have value and can help you get further in life, and which of these opinions need to go into the garbage bin and we never need to discuss them ever again. So that's number one, develop a thick skin. Number two, be able to discern meaningful commentary from garbage. And then number three would be network. The way you get to the top is that you need to know people. It's great if you have marketable skills. It's wonderful if you have an advanced degree. It's like a bonus if you've worked in a leadership job before of some kind. But at the end of the day, if nobody knows you and you haven't like established these relationships, made friends in the industry, gotten to know people and worked at different companies where you've maintained relationships with people in those companies, you're going to have a hard time. When you get to, like, no one ever says this, but when you get to the C-suite or you get to leadership positions that are pretty high up, it's all about relationships. People hire people who they've heard of before. They reach out to a recruiter or a friend, like, oh, we're looking for a new EIC. Do you know anybody? Like, that's how, like, very rarely does anyone get their new EIC from like someone just sending in a resume through LinkedIn. Like that just doesn't happen that way. Usually
Yeah.
there are headhunters involved and there are players involved who can give, they ask their peers, is there anyone you could send in my direction who you've been eyeing, that you've been watching? And so it's just, I can't say enough. Like you need to establish relationships. You need to have a network, and they have to be authentic relationships. You can't do the transactional thing with people, because unless you just want to never get work, like no one wants a transactional relationship. They want a real relationship, and you should be
Yeah.
able to make real relationships because you have so many shared interests. You both like, media, for example, and you have a passion for it. So you should be able to build a relationship from there. And then over time, because you have this wonderful, rewarding relationships, with so many different people within the industry, that, your name gets bandied about in the right circles, and then you get to
Mhm.
move up. So yeah, relationship building is a big one too. And I guess I would say after that, the fourth is to not be intimidated just because you don't know something.
Mm.
If you're smart and you're capable, you can figure it out. You can learn it on the job. You don't need to have like literally every qualification that is listed on a job application. You just need the ones that matter. So it's like, have you worked in a leadership position before? Have you had success in your leadership position? Where did what kind of jobs did you work in, media or entertainment, before you came across this one? That's critical as well. That's the bulk of the advice that I would give. Along with developing a thick skin, you just, for your own sanity and mental health, you have to decide like what's a battle and what isn't. If
Mm.
it's if if it's something that's going to harm you or harm your organization, you want to speak up. You want to like throw a fit. You want to do whatever you have to do to get people to understand how serious something is. If it's something you can just let go, like just let it go. Like don't become the person who has the reputation for being like really problematic because they freak out over every little thing. So resiliency is very important. Being patient and understanding is really important, and to have a nuanced perspective so you understand that not everything is worth burning the whole house down.
Picking your battles, yeah, and investing your energy wisely. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that takes me to my next question for you. So, you have a list of impressive achievements when it comes to public speaking. We're curious, how did you first get involved in public speaking? Was it something that you've always enjoyed, or did it take time for you to develop your skills?
Oh, I always liked to speak in public. When I was a kid, in the school play, they gave me the character with the most lines, like every time. Because I would memorize every line and I would get up there and I would sell it and regurgitate it like it was nothing. So I've always, always, always been into public speaking. My teachers encouraged it, my parents encouraged it. I'm an extrovert, I'm really outgoing. So I normally don't get nervous, but sometimes on occasion I will. But for the most part, it's pretty easy for me.
What is it like to speak in front of large groups of people? So, you've spoken in front of really big crowds. You say you don't get nervous in those instances. Are there a little bit of nerves involved? And how do you connect with your audience?
Well, it's funny. If it's a live audience, I'm almost never nervous because I love a live audience because someone you can actually make eye contact with and you can talk to them and feed off of their energy. And so I love an audience. The hardest for me is like doing like a TV hit on CNN where it's literally just me in a dark room with a camera. Like that
Mm.
is like I can barely do Zoom, like meetings. I lose focus so quickly. I get distracted so easily. So it's like, so yeah, I would rather speak to thousands at a rally than just talk to one camera in a CNN office somewhere in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
where prospectively millions of people are watching. But because I'm not talking to anyone, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So, you're feeding off of that live energy, the people
Yeah.
around you in the atmosphere. Okay. So, what has been the biggest lesson you have learned along the way in your career?
The biggest lesson that I've probably learned were probably amongst the advice that I gave, that I outlined. I learned to develop a thick skin when I was in college. I learned not to sweat the small stuff. I don't know, as a kid, like my mother was a perfectionist. Like she wanted everything to always be the optimal best that it could be, from whatever she was doing to whatever I was doing. Like she was very obsessed with perfection. But perfection is illusion, it's not real. And so it's impossible. You'll never reach it. And so
Mm.
I learned how to be much more laid back and relaxed and roll with the punches rather than just rage against the machine constantly when you know it's not going to change. The only person, as my father used to always say, that you can change is you. You're the only person. You can't change anybody else. So if you don't like, your job, if you don't like the relationship you're in, if you wish they could be better, I mean, maybe they could, but they'd have to want to be better. It's
Mm,
up to you to decide if you want to stay in that relationship or stay in that job, because they might not change. They might not
mm,
ever change. And so you have to accept that the only person you can truly control is you. And when the only person that you can control truly is you, it's on you. You know, your success, your failure, it's all on you, and you have to adapt and be understanding of that. And one last thing in relation to this, I did learn that failure is just a part of success. Failure is a down payment on future success. So you should not be afraid to fail. Always, always, always be willing to take a calculated risk on yourself.
I really like that. It's a down payment to future success. I'm going to keep that one. That's a good little gem. Danielle, you are an advocate for mental health. My next question to you is, what inspired you to become an advocate for mental health? And what do you believe are the most important steps we can take as a society to address the stigma surrounding mental health issues?
Part of the reason why I became so passionate about mental health is it was because of my own journey. When I was 24, I started struggling with depression and anxiety. And by 2005, I was diagnosed with bipolar type 2 disorder. And so I didn't know anybody who was openly living with the illness who was happy and successful. When you're sick, all you ever meet are other sick people. And so I just thought this is what the rest of my life is going to be like. I'm just going to live in my parents' basement and take my meds and be miserable. That was going to be my future. And that's a bleak, depressing future. And so I made a promise to myself that if I ever got to a point of stability where I felt healthy, where I felt good, where I felt strong, that I would speak out about living with bipolar disorder, because I felt like it was important for other people who are struggling with this illness to see people like me who've managed to find balance in their life, who've found therapy that works, who found medication that works, who found techniques and coping mechanisms that work, and is living a very full and fulfilling life. So because I know that it would have meant a lot to me to have seen it when I was sick. So this is my way of giving back to other people who are struggling with the same illness, is that I'm willing to tell my story. I'm willing to be out there with the disease, even though there is still quite a stigma against people living with bipolar disorder, because it is a mood disorder. And for a lot of people, mood disorders sound scary. So as a society, I feel like what we have to do is we have to get away from this notion that somehow it's the mentally ill person's fault that they're mentally ill.
Mm,
Mental illness is no different than like diabetes or asthma. Like, you have to treat it, you have to deal with it. It's a health condition. And so people need to understand that mental health is just a part of health. Your brain is in your body. You don't have any more control over your brain than you do over your heart or lungs. People need to just like, if they look at it from that angle, that this is an actual illness, that it's not something that's just made up. I can't
yeah.
just decide to feel better because it's a chronic condition. If we can get to that where people just understand it to be a disease and respect it as a disease, I feel
Mm,
like we'll go a long way with to erasing the stigma. Because, when you have a chronic illness like fibroids, for example, people rarely go like, well, what could have you done to keep from getting those fibroids? Like, oh, how was this? Clearly, you must have done something wrong. Like,
yeah.
no one does that. They understand that fibroids are just a growth that it just happens in your uterus that you have no control over whatsoever. It could be genetic, it could be not. You don't have any power over it. And my argument is that I didn't have any power over becoming bipolar. Like, it was always going to happen. It was always in me. For most bipolar people, it manifests around age 23, 24. I was 24 when I started having serious issues. I got through it. I'm better for it. I'm a stronger person for it. And it's not something for other people to be afraid of. Because for most mentally ill people, the only people they tend to be at risk of harming is typically themselves.
Thank you for sharing. I think that seeing somebody in such a high profile, successful position as yourself speaking so openly about your mental health challenges really goes a long way in supporting people who are going through the same struggle. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so unrelated topic, but here on Her Expat Life, we are a little bit travel obsessed. So, where have you traveled to that has inspired you and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I've been to a lot of cool places, but it was probably Paris, France.
Hmm.
And the reason why, I'm obsessed with history, and Paris is a very old city that's full. of history. And then Paris has played such a pivotal role in so many different aspects of world history and our society. And so, yeah, like it was inspiring, to learn more about, the French Revolution and the various French revolutions, because there's more than one, or about the various governments or their history and the slave trade, or just everything. Like, it was fascinating to learn about France and Paris and its culture. And it was inspirational in the sense that that was one of the first times I'd ever gone overseas, was to Paris, France. And it got me over my fear of traveling abroad. And now I do it with ease. So,
Mhm.
it was
Mhm.
also influential in that way. Like, it got me broken into getting out of this country.
And why do you think you had fears of traveling abroad? What was your internal dialogue with this?
Oh, I have a lot of anxiety in general. And so it didn't really
Mm.
take much. Most of my
Mm.
family is not particularly well traveled. My grandparents grew up very poor on both sides of my family. They just, even though they maybe travel within the country, it was often difficult for African Americans to travel in the United States, especially after slavery, because there were Jim Crow laws that made it difficult for you to find lodging or food if you were on the road. And so because of those factors, very few people in our family were well traveled. Quite a few people have anxiety about just flying. My mother could barely get on a plane. I think their fears and anxiety, I adopted them.
Mm.
And coupled with my own mental illness, just magnified it even bigger. Like, part of me knew logically I was just going to Paris, France, and it's just a city in
Yeah.
another country. But there was another part of me that felt like I was going to go fall through a portal into another universe. So it was like very bizarre. But once I got that out of my system, I was fine.
And where to next? When you're thinking of the next destination you'd love to visit, is there a place that pops up
Oh,
or
there's
stands out?
so many. I'm thinking Portugal probably the next place. I really, really
Ah,
want to go to Madeira.
okay. To Madeira.
Yes.
You're not going to believe me when I tell you we're actually doing. I'm in Madeira right now. We're having this
Oh,
conversation.
wow. I've seen nothing
I'm
but
in it.
beautiful, beautiful things about Madeira.
It's a great island. My grandparents are actually from the island, and I'm here visiting for a
Nice.
few days. So, if you believe in synchronicity, Danielle, I think this is an indication that this
It's
should be
meant
your
to
next.
be.
It's meant to be. Okay, so last but not least, my final question for you is what has been the most interesting or meaningful position you have undertaken throughout your career and why? What is the highlight? What stands out for you?
Probably the two roles that have been the most impactful in my life was originally the role at the Root. We were able to do so many things that had such a huge impact in the news cycle and the political cycle and the African American community. So that meant a lot. And that was my first real true leadership position. So I learned a lot about myself and what kind of leader I wanted to be. And then the second is obviously, it's HuffPost. This is the biggest job I've ever had. This is the most people I've ever had work for me. And every day is something new. There's a new challenge, there's a new experience. The highs are really high. Like, we're operating and competing on a level, like we're punching well above our weight class. Like, we only have a staff of 120 some odd people, but we're generating 300 million page views a month or more, just out of
Wow.
that staff. So the fact that we're so successful in spite of our size,
Mm.
because we're not as big as the New York Times, we're not as big as the Washington Post, but we're very, very mighty. And I just love that. We're scrappy and we're smart and we're funny and we have personality. And it's a beautiful thing. I greatly enjoy being part of HuffPost.
Danielle, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. How can people reach out to you? How can people follow you on social media? Where can people get in touch?
Sure. So on Instagram and Threads, I am Belton, last name first, Danielle Belton, Danielle, on those two sites. And yeah, those are the best ways to get in touch with me.
Perfect. Okay, for those of you that have watched today's episode, I really hope that you've enjoyed us chatting to our guest, Danielle Belton. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please make sure to visit her expatlife.com and click through to see all the different packages that we can offer, from membership programs to living and working abroad packages to help you. Also, if you're looking for a way to connect with females abroad, please make sure to download our recently launched app, which makes connecting with women all around the world so much much easier. And make sure to follow us on social media. Also, click the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. Leave some comments below and let us know what you'd like to see us feature next. And until next time, thank you, Danielle. We hope that this is not the last time you will grace our screens. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you.
Thanks.
Bye.